The ancient Mesopotamians, Sumerians, Babylonians, all those people, they wrote on clay. That was their natural activity.
500,000 clay tablets, 4,000 years old, written in a language so dead that fewer than 500 people on Earth can still read it. Most have never been read at all. They have been sitting in museum drawers, silent for over a century. Until now. Because artificial intelligence was just turned loose on this ancient Sumerian writing, and it is reading the unreadable at last. What is coming off that clay is not what your history books promised you. Some of it is genuinely hard to explain. And once you hear it, you will not be able to unhear it. The first lines, "Let me take you back to May of 2023, because that is where this actually begins." A small team, computer scientists and Assyriologists from Tel Aviv University and Oriel University in Israel, published a paper that, on the surface, looked completely unremarkable. They had built a neural network. Its job sounds almost boring when you say it out loud. Read Akkadian, turn it into English. But sit with what that means for a second. Akkadian is the language of ancient Babylon and Assyria. It was written in cuneiform, those wedge marks pressed into wet clay, across more than 2,000 years, from roughly 2,500 BCE down into the 1st century of the Common Era. It is one of the oldest written languages that has ever existed on this planet. And here is the part that should stop you. Almost nobody alive can read it. Picture the moment the thing first works. Lines of 4,000-year-old script feeding into a model, and clean modern English coming back out the other side. Not gibberish, not guesses. Real translation, and it was good. On the standard scoring system researchers use to grade machine translation, this model, built for a dead language nobody speaks, performed about as well as the commercial translators built for living languages with millions of speakers. It could read the wedges straight off a scan, it could handle the tax records and the royal inscriptions and the legal contracts. It worked. Let that settle for a moment. We have spent decades teaching machines to translate French into English, with billions of pages of practice material to learn from. This team taught one to translate a language that died before Rome was founded, off the surface of a baked clay brick. And it came back fluent. That paper was the moment a wall that had stood for 150 years finally cracked. And to understand why that wall mattered so much, you need to understand what has been sitting behind it, in the dark, waiting. 500,000 secrets. Here is the thing almost nobody outside this field knows. There are somewhere between 500,000 and 600,000 cuneiform tablets and fragments sitting in the museums and universities of the world right now. Most of them came out of the ground over a century ago, in the Great Digs, layered at Nineveh, woolly at Ur, the German campaigns at Uruk. They got boxed up, cataloged, shipped off to London and Paris and Chicago and Philadelphia. And then they were put on shelves, and then they just sat there. Roughly 90% of them have never been fully translated. Think about that number. Nearly 500,000 tablets, never read. Not lost, not stolen, not buried under some desert. They are sitting in drawers, in archive rooms, in museum basements, a short walk from where tourists are standing, completely unreadable to almost everyone on Earth. Why? Because the math is impossible. At any given moment, there are fewer than 500 working Assyriologists in the entire world. 500 people. And cuneiform is brutal. Hundreds of signs, each one with several possible readings, written in dialects that shifted and bent across 3,000 years. A brilliant specialist might publish a few dozen tablets in an entire career. Do the arithmetic. The tablets pile up faster than human beings can ever read them. They have been losing this race for 100 years. Picture it for a second. A drawer in a museum basement. Inside it, a tablet that some scribe pressed out by lamplight 4,000 years ago, with something on his mind he thought was worth keeping forever. A letter, a complaint, a prayer. And from the day it was dug up until right now, not one single living person has ever read it. His voice has been sitting in that drawer, mid-sentence, for longer than most countries have existed. Multiply that by nearly 500,000. That is the silence we are talking about. That is the wall the 2023 paper just put a crack in. And the point was never to fire the human experts. It was to free them. Let the machine chew through the boring stuff, the receipts and the inventories, at impossible speed, so the handful of real specialists can spend their lives on the texts that actually matter. And it spread fast. ORACCCDLI. The Digital Hammurabi Project over at Johns Hopkins. All of them now running on tools built on the foundation that paper laid. Tens of thousands of tablets that no living person had ever read are being processed for the very first time. And what is coming off them points somewhere nobody was quite ready for. Somewhere much, much older than the Bible. If a 500,000-year-old secret finally being cracked open is the kind of thing you want to be in the room for, do me one favor and hit subscribe right now before we go any deeper. Because the part that comes next is the part they never teach you in church, and I do not want you to miss it. The first cities. To get where we are going, we have to start at the very beginning. The first cities of the entire human record. In the Sumerian tradition, the first city of all was Eridu. The tablets describe it as the place where kingship literally came down out of the sky. The place where the god Enki, known later in Akkadian as Ea, built his temple. And here is what gets me. It is a real place. You can stand on it. It is called Tel Abu Shahrain today in southern Iraq, and people live there continuously going back to the late 6th millennium BCE. The oldest city in the human imagination has an address. Then there is Nippur, further north, the spiritual capital of Sumer, sacred to Enlil, the chief god, the god of storm and air and raw authority. Modern Nippur has given up around 50,000 tablets. 50,000. One of the biggest single hauls anywhere on the planet. And almost everything we know about how the Sumerians explained themselves to themselves came out of that ground. The flood story, the creation stories, the lists of the first kings. And then there is Ebla. In 1974, at a site called Tel Mardik in modern Syria, an Italian team started pulling tablets out of the burned wreckage of a palace nobody knew existed. 17,000 of them, dating to the middle of the 3rd millennium BCE. It has taken 2 entire generations of scholars to work through it, and they are still not done. Those same AI tools are being aimed at the unread Ebla material right now, and it is already redrawing the map of what northern Syria looked like 4,500 years ago. This is the scale we are talking about. Hundreds of thousands of tablets, 2 languages, dozens of sites across Iraq and Syria and Iran, 3,000 years of unbroken writing, and buried inside all of it, in the oldest layer humanity ever set down in clay, is a story about how we were made. You already half know it. You just do not know where it really came from. Yet. Made to work. The single most important text for this, the one that matters most for understanding what these people believed about where we came from, is a poem called the Atrahasis Epic. The name means something close to the exceedingly wise. The most complete copy we have was written around 1700 BCE, and across 3 long tablets it tells you how human beings came to exist. And honestly, it is not the gentle version you were expecting. It opens before us, before people. The world is run by gods, and the gods are split in 2. The senior gods sit in council and make the big decisions. The junior gods do the actual labor, digging the rivers, hauling out the canals, working the fields. They do the brutal, endless physical work that keeps the whole world running. And one day, they break. They have worked too long. The labor is too hard. So they throw down their tools, burn their carrying baskets, and march on the house of Enlil himself, demanding it stop. The senior gods panic and call a council. And the solution that wins, proposed by Enki, the clever one, the god of fresh water and craft, is chilling in how practical it is. Make a new kind of creature. Make it do the work instead. Make humans. The text describes the recipe in cold, ritual detail. The mother goddess and Enki take clay. They mix it with the blood of a slain god and the spit of the divine council. They shape it. They bring it to life. And out of that mix of mud and divine blood comes us, made for one reason and one reason only: to pick up the shovel the gods put down. That is the foundational claim sitting in this 4,000-year-old poem. You were not made in love, you were made to work. And for a while, the plan works perfectly, which, as it turns out, is exactly the problem. The Great Flood. The humans are a runaway success. They take over the labor. And then they do the thing the gods did not plan for. They multiply, fast. Within a few generations, there are so many of us that, in the words of the poem itself, the noise of humanity becomes unbearable. Enlil cannot sleep. The whole world has gotten too loud. So the chief god of Mesopotamia decides we are a mistake that needs correcting, and he gets to work, first a plague, then a drought. And when humanity refuses to die, when we keep surviving everything thrown at us, he reaches for the final answer, a flood. A flood meant to scrub the species off the face of the earth entirely. Now, watch how familiar this gets. This is the original flood story. The oldest versions are Sumerian, where the one survivor is named Ziusudra. By the time it gets folded into the great Babylonian epic of Gilgamesh, Tablet 11, pulled out of the ruins at Nineveh, the survivor has a new name, Utnapishtim. Same man, 2 languages, one story carried across more than 1,000 years of clay. And it goes like this. The chief god decides to wipe out mankind. The wise god quietly tips off one righteous man. That man is told to build a great boat and to bring aboard his family, his animals, and the seed of every living thing. The flood comes. The rain falls for 7 days and 7 nights. The waters rise. The world drowns. The boat finally grinds to rest on a mountain. The survivor sends out birds to see if dry land has come back. He steps out. He makes a sacrifice. And the gods, drawn by the smell of the smoke, gather around it and decide they will never do this again. If your skin is crawling a little, good. It should be, because the dates are not up for debate. Atrahasis, the Sumerian flood story, the Gilgamesh tablet, all of them were written centuries, in some cases more than 1,000 years before the version you grew up with. And I want to be clear about what I am and am not saying here, because this is where people get loud. This is not someone on a podcast spinning a theory. This is not a guess. These are physical objects, baked clay, dug out of real dirt, dated by real methods, sitting under glass in real museums you can buy a ticket to walk into. The flood story you know did not come from nowhere. It has an ancestor, and the ancestor is older, and you can go look at it. Which brings us all the way back to that room in 1872. George Smith, in the British Museum, suddenly realizing the broken tablet in his hands is telling the flood story. Older, in clay, sitting in a London drawer. That is the moment the entire Western world had to face something it did not want to face. And the flood was only the beginning of what these people wrote down. Because there is another story in the clay. One about a man who was offered the one thing every human being has ever wanted, and who said no. The man who said no. His name is Adapa, and his story is one of the strangest things ever pressed into clay. We have it on tablets found at Tel El Amarna, in Egypt, inside the diplomatic archive of a pharaoh, which tells you this story was traveling across the entire ancient world. Adapa is a man, a sage, a priest of Enki, the wisest mortal who ever lived, given understanding by the god himself. He has been given almost everything, but he has not been given one thing. He cannot live forever. The whole story turns on a single accident. Adapa is out fishing when the south wind flips his boat. Furious, he curses the wind, and the wind breaks. For 7 days it does not blow, and the order of the cosmos itself goes wrong. So the high god of heaven, Anu, summons Adapa up to answer for it. Before he goes, his father Enki gives him careful instructions. When he reaches heaven, he will be offered food and water. He must refuse them. They are the food of death and the water of death. To take them is to die. So Adapa climbs to heaven. He stands before Anu. He answers for the broken wind. And then comes the moment that has haunted everyone who has read it for over a century. Anu does not punish him. Anu offers him food and water. But not death, life, eternal life. The single chance handed to one mortal to step across the line that separates men from gods forever. And Adapa, faithfully doing exactly what his father told him, refuses. The moment is gone. Anu, baffled, sends him back down. Still mortal, the gift declined. And because Adapa stands in for all of us, humanity itself just lost, through the strange advice of the very God who made us, the chance to live forever. The text never tells you why Enki gave that advice. Scholars have fought about it for 100 years. Maybe he was protecting Adapa from a trap. Maybe he was jealous, unwilling to let a human cross over. Maybe the whole thing is just an old answer to the oldest question. Why do we die when the gods do not? Sit with that for a second. 4,000 years ago, someone in a mud brick city was lying awake wrestling with the exact same question that keeps you up at night. And instead of letting it go, they pressed their answer into clay so it would outlast them. It did. It outlasted everything. But whatever the reason, look at the shape of it. A mortal offered escape from death, losing it over one fateful choice and a piece of divine advice. The forbidden fruit, the waters of life, the line we are not allowed to cross. Adapa was the original. He went home mortal, but Adapa was not alone. He was one of 7. And the other 6 are the reason the people who lived afterward believed everything they built had come from somewhere not entirely human. The 7 sages. The tradition calls them the Apkallu, the 7 sages. And the story goes that before the flood, 7 wise beings came and handed civilization to humanity. They taught the arts, they founded the cities, they set up the rituals. Adapa is sometimes counted as the first of the 7. You can see the Apkallu carved into the stone walls of Assyrian palaces, listed among the gods, built into the protective rituals around the homes of kings. They are the foundational figures in this civilization's own account of how everything we have actually began. And here is what I need you to hold on to, because this is exactly where the story usually gets hijacked. Every single thing I have told you, Atrahasis, the flood, Adapa, the 7 sages, has been sitting in the tablets the whole time. None of it is secret. The AI did not unearth it. So the obvious question is, if all of this was already known, what is the AI actually for? And the answer is the part that certain people on the internet desperately do not want you to hear, because they have spent 50 years selling you a fake version of this story, and the real one is so much bigger than the hoax. The hoax and the bigger truth. You have heard the fringe version, even if you did not know that is what it was. Ancient astronauts, a secret planet. The Anunnaki as flesh and blood aliens who engineered the human race to mine their gold. Almost all of that traces back to one man, the late writer Zecharia Sitchin, and a book he published in 1976. And here is the brutal truth that never made it out of the universities. Working Assyriologists rejected his readings decades ago and have kept rejecting them ever since. The problem was never that he was debated. The problem is that the correction never reached the public. The myth simply outran the truth. Take the word everybody throws around, Nibiru. In the actual surviving astronomical texts, a series called Mul.Apin, written around 1000 BCE, Nibiru is a sky position, a crossing point, most likely the planet Jupiter, or a fixed marker in the heavens used to track other stars. It is not a hidden planet swinging in on some doomsday orbit. The tablets exist. They have been translated over and over. They are precise, technical, and boring in the best possible way. And the Anunnaki. In Sumerian and Akkadian, that word just means a class of gods, something like the princely offspring. They are the great gods of the pantheon. They get worshipped, begged, feared, and occasionally cursed, exactly like gods in any ancient religion. They are not astronauts. They are deities. Now, I want to be straight with you, because the honest version is what makes this incredible. The AI is not magic, and the people who built it say so out loud. It stumbles on longer sentences. It hallucinates more on the poetry and the hymns than on the dry receipts. It works best as an assistant to a human, not a replacement. There is no secret phrase in the clay about alien overlords. There never was. And once you let go of the hoax, the thing you are actually left with is so much stranger and so much harder to explain. Because here is what really happened. The footnote that wrote Genesis. For most people, Sumer is a footnote, a blurry name from a textbook, the boring civilization that came before the interesting ones. A people most of us could not place on a map. And that footnote civilization, more than 4,000 years ago, a full 1,000 years before any of it reached the book on your shelf, sat down and wrote the source layer of the most powerful stories the Western world has ever told. They wrote about humanity being shaped out of clay. They wrote about a great flood, sent by an angry god, survived by one righteous man and his family in a boat that came to rest on a mountain. They wrote about a man offered immortality, who lost it over a single misunderstanding. They wrote about the unbreakable line between gods and mortals, and then those stories traveled from the temples of Eridu and Nippur, through the archives of Bronze Age Egypt at Tel El Amarna, into the royal library at Nineveh, and eventually into the texts that would shape the faith of billions. The survivor's name changes as it goes. Ziusudra, then Utnapishtim, then, much later, Noah. That is the thing that is genuinely hard to explain. Not aliens, not a hidden planet. Something far more unsettling. That the oldest questions human beings have ever asked were answered first by a people we forgot, in a language nobody can read, in clay we left sitting in a drawer for 150 years. It has been in plain sight the entire time, in the British Museum and the Louvre and the Penn Museum and the Oriental Institute in Chicago. And the AI is finally letting us read the rest of it, which means the most important part of this story has not even happened yet. What comes next? Remember, the famous texts, the flood and the creation and Adapa, those are the part we have already read. They are maybe 10% of everything. The other 90%, the 500,000 unread tablets, those are the receipts, the letters, the court records, the temple inventories, the stuff the epics never bothered to write down. And that is exactly why it matters, because those tablets will tell us what the poems never did, what people ate, what they owed, who they married, how the cities actually ran, what the priests actually owned, what the kings actually commanded. For the first time in the entire modern study of this world, the Sumerians and the Babylonians are about to start talking to us at full volume, not through a handful of epics, but through the entire crushing weight of everything they ever wrote down. The first city was Eridu, the wise god was Enki, the flood survivor was Ziusudra, then Utnapishtim, then Noah. The man who said no to immortality was Adapa. All of it was always there, pressed into clay, waiting in the dark of a museum drawer for someone to show up with the right tools. The tools have arrived, the translation has begun, and after 150 years of silence, the tablets are starting to speak. So, here is what I want from you. If these stories were already ancient when Genesis borrowed them, if the flood and the clay and the lost gift of living forever were carved in Sumer 1,000 years earlier, then where do you think the very first version of this story actually came from? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every one of them, and the theories people leave on this exact question are never what I expect. And if you want to be here when the next 90% finally gets read, because it is being read right now while you are watching this, subscribe and stay close. This story is only just getting started, and you are going to want to be in the room when the rest of the clay starts to talk.